Now, what if I told you one of the most consumed drinks in our world is under threat? And this will literally scare a lot of you, and it definitely scared me. The average Australian and Brit drinks about 2 cups of coffee a day. Americans take it to 3. Some studies even show that Germans drink more coffee than beer and water. Now, there are 124 species of coffee, but we rely on just 2 for 99% of our coffee consumption. Now, it doesn't take a scientist to figure out that that is really, really not sustainable. 2 varieties for almost all of our consumption, and they are Arabica and Robusta, making up 56% and 43% of global production, respectively. Now, Arabica originates from Ethiopia and South Sudan. It's a cool tropical plant with a mean annual temperature requirement of around 19 degrees Celsius. It is vulnerable to increasing global temperatures and a disease called the coffee leaf rust. It's a fungal disease which, on a side note, had an epidemic in 2012 that devastated coffee farms through Latin America, causing more than $3 billion in damage and lost income. Now, Robusta, on the other hand, fares slightly better. The species grow at a low elevation across much of wet tropical Africa. They require a mean annual temperature of 23 degrees Celsius, so 4 degrees higher than Arabica, and it is resistant to certain strains of that coffee leaf rust. But Robusta falls short in its flavor, and it's widely regarded as inferior to Arabica, so that's why most people don't like instant coffee, because that's where Robusta is mainly used. Now, let's look at those above stats for a moment. 99% of our consumption comes from 2 plants, both of which are really picky and fussy about where they grow and the temperature. 125 million people worldwide depend on coffee for their livelihoods. So, what are the risks here if we were to think about it? All right, one example is that the Colombian mountain region, where coffee is grown, is warming by 0.3 degrees Celsius or 0.5 degrees Fahrenheit per decade. So according to a study published in April last year by Peter Baker and a team of scientists, the number of hours of sunlight has also declined by 19% since the middle of last century due to increasing cloud cover, and there's no longer enough sun to sustain high levels of coffee production in some areas. In fact, when surveying farmers, their coffee production annually can vary up to 40%. That's huge for someone's livelihood. Imagine one year you're earning $100,000 to make it easy with math. Next year it's $60,000. And you have no stability at all. Now, obviously I used 100,000, but these coffee farmers, they're generally small to medium-sized agribusinesses, so it's much less for them. So this can mean literally make it or break it. Now, something I learned about that I'm very impressed by is a term called perennial crops. Now, for those who don't know what perennial crops are, that's okay. This is a relatively new technology, and for those that do, I'm impressed. Now, this is going to blow some people's minds. A perennial crop acts like any other crop with one simple exception that changes the whole game. Unlike annual crop harvests, they don't need to be replanted each year. After harvest, they automatically grow back. Now, the Soviet Union first attempted this with wheat, but had limited success. But as technology has grown, labs around the world are making huge strides here. What are the benefits? Well, there's no soil erosion. They're water efficient because their roots are deeper. The nutrient cycle is more efficient because they use their roots to get those nutrients. It's not just about the supplements that the farmers are giving them. And of course, carbon sequestration, because they can keep those mature roots working non-stop on eating away at that carbon to help grow themselves. So that all sounds well and good, but what does that mean in the real world? Remember how I mentioned that coffee leaf rust that caused $3 billion in damage? Well, it actually didn't affect Colombia as bad as El Salvador. And that's because Cafe, who are essentially the NASA for coffee, developed a strain of Arabica called Castillo. Now, this made 3/4 of the trees in Colombia leaf rust resistant. Instead of providing seeds of just one genotype, each bag that Senicafe sells to coffee farmers at cost contains seeds of 35 different lines, ensuring that some plants will manage to thrive whatever environmental conditions might arise. So, looking at it today, land needed for coffee in Colombia has shrunk by a fifth, but coffee production has remained roughly the same since the 1990s. Now, this is because of the increased efficiencies in the production process, such as you can now plant more trees per acre without the high risk of this disease just wiping everything out, but also biological controls for certain insects and agronomic innovations. So this is actually really, really good news. So before, when we're talking about one bean just having 56% of global production, it is the one bean, but there's 35 different genomic expressions that are having here. So this is really, really important. But this is relevant across the board. Other countries fall into different scenarios. So climate change will reduce the global area suitable for coffee by around 50% across emission scenarios. Now, this is according to a report published in the Journal of Climatic Change in 2015. So this is just an example in Colombia, where we're talking about this different strain. Every country has a different climate, a different humidity, and different winds that control all these outcomes. So we've covered that most of our coffee comes from two sources. There are diseases and climate challenges that threaten this, but we've got techniques such as perennial crops to tackle this. There is one other solution, and this is very, very cool. There is a new bean that's also an old bean, rediscovered in the wild in 2018 after years of searching, and it has the unique combination of tolerance to high temperatures and has a superior flavor. It's called Coffea stenophylla, a rare and threatened species from West Africa. Results from an independent panel of experts that did a tasting show that the flavor of stenophylla is like high-end Arabica. But the upside is that it can grow in temperatures 1.9 degrees Celsius higher than that of Robusta and 6.2 degrees higher than that of Arabica. So currently it's on the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species as vulnerable. But measures are required to protect the future of this species in the wild. Now, once this bean has been studied more and populations start to bounce back, there is potential in this in regards to not letting the coffee population go extinct, but also it could help support financially some of the world's poorest farmers to grow a crop that is traded at a healthy margin. Now, this is something that we're banking on. Imagine that something happens and this stenophylla doesn't really require, it's not scaled yet. So now with climate change, as it currently stands with the technologies that are available, there is a risk that because we rely on two beans and the climate is rising, that both beans could go extinct, or even worse, we just have to have instant coffee. And for any coffee snobs out there, that is just unacceptable. So if you weren't fighting for climate change before, you are now.